explain to you the meaning of each word. I, me, an individual, a committee of one, pledge, dedicate all of my worldly goods to give without self-pity. Allegiance, my love and my devotion to the flag, our standard, Old Glory, a symbol of freedom. Wherever she waves, there's respect, because your loyalty has given her a dignity that shouts freedom is everybody's job. United, that means that we have all come together. States, individual communities that have united into 48 great states. 48 individual communities with pride and dignity and purpose, all divided with imaginary boundaries, yet united to a common purpose, and that's love for country. And to the republic, a state in which sovereign power is invested in representatives chosen by the people to govern. And government is the people. And it's from the people to the leaders, not from the leaders to the people, for which it stands. One nation, meaning so blessed by God, indivisible, incapable of being divided, with liberty, which is freedom, the right of power to live one's own life without threats, fear, or some sort of retaliation. And justice, the principle or qualities of dealing fairly with others. For all, which means, boys and girls, it's as much your country as it is mine. And now, boys and girls, let me hear you recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Since I was a small boy, 2 states have been added to our country, and 2 words have been added to the Pledge of Allegiance: under God. Wouldn't it be a pity if someone said that is a prayer and that would be eliminated from schools too?
Liberty's Guardian, Guns and Ammunition, a family-owned business located in the heart of Ohio's hunting country. Let us help you find the right shotgun or rifle for you. Or if you're looking for a pistol or concealed carry, we have a nice selection of compact and subcompact pistols for that too. Check out our website at www.libertiesguardian.com. That website again is www.libertiesguardian.com. Go to the website and check out our selection today.
Join Mark and Don for Weapons Wednesday, where you'll learn how to use everything from your bare hands to your average AR-15.
The 12-gauge autoloader.
Sure.
The 45 long slide.
Yep.
With laser sighting.
You betcha.
The Uzi 9mm.
Yes, sir.
Phased plasma rifle in the 40-watt range.
What are you, crazy?
Wrong.
Okay, they'll talk about that too. So whatever question you have about whatever weapon you have, call Mark and Don on Weapons Wednesday. And remember, your mind is your first best weapon.
I had a dream the other night that, well, I didn't understand. A figure walked in through the mist with a flintlock in his hand. His clothes were torn and dirty as he stood there by my bed. He took off his 3-cornered hat, and speaking low to me, he said, "We fought a revolution to secure our liberty. We wrote the Constitution as a shield from tyranny. For future generations, this legacy we gave. In this, the land of the free and home of the brave. The freedoms we secured for you, we'd hoped you'd always keep. But tyrants labored endlessly while your parents were asleep. Your freedom's gone, your courage lost. You're no more than a slave. In this, the land of the free and home of the brave. You buy permits to travel and permits to own a gun. Permits to start a business or to build a place for one. On land that you believe you own, you pay a yearly rent, although you have no voice in saying how the money's spent. Your children must attend a school that doesn't educate, and your Christian values can't be taught according to the state. You read about the current news in a regulated press, and you pay a tax you do not owe to please the IRS. Your money is no longer made of silver nor of gold. You trade your wealth for paper so your life can be controlled. You pay for crimes that make our nation turn from God and shame. You've taken Satan's number. You've traded in your name. You've given government control to those who do you harm so they could burn down churches and seize the family farm and keep our country deep in debt. Put men of God in jail. Harass your fellow countrymen while corrupted courts prevail. Your public servants don't uphold the solemn oaths they've sworn. And your daughters visit doctors so their children won't be born. Your leaders send artillery and guns to foreign shores and send your sons to slaughter fighting other people's wars. Can you regain the freedoms for which we fought and died? Or don't you have the courage or the faith to stand with pride? And are there no more values for which you'll fight to save? Or do you wish your children to live in fear and be a slave? O sons of the Republic, arise, take a stand, defend the Constitution, the supreme law of the land. Preserve our great republic and each God-given right. And pray to God to keep the torch of freedom burning bright. As I awoke, he'd vanished in the mist from whence he came. His words were true. We are not free, but we have ourselves to blame. For even now as tyrants trample each God-given right, we only watch and tremble, too afraid to stand and fight. If he stood by your bedside in a dream while you were asleep and wondered what remains of the freedoms he'd fought to keep, what would be your answer if he called out from the grave? Is this still the land of the free and home of the brave? God bless you, and God bless this republic.
And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the first hour of the afternoon intelligence report. I'm Mark Karnke. One day closer to victory for all of our brothers and sisters, both on and behind the lines in occupied territories, southwest, north, southeast, and east. Ladies and gentlemen, you were listening to us on Libertytreeradio.4mg.com, AM and FM micro stations, AM and FM conventional stations, CB base stations, and UltraNet, Hallmark and Golden Spike technologies, east and west of the Mississippi, along with Alaska. And Liberty Tree Radio on the Liberty Tree Radio channel on YouTube live right now. So it's a quick fix for you. If you are having problems with any other system, try. It might work a little better for you depending on where you are in the country, what kind of service you have. Especially if you're on cell phone, you might be able to go to YouTube app and then boom, plug right in. Go to Liberty Tree Radio. Then right there, go to the live feed block. There is a little cube icon there with images that are changing even as we speak. There is no studio feed, but there is obviously an audio feed. So you don't get an image, but you do get the sound. Anyway, good afternoon to all of our friends out there in lower 49, which includes the great state of Jefferson, along with CONUS, the outlying 2 states, the territories, and the clock. It is 5:05 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It is Communications Tuesday. It is August 4th. It is the 12th year of open Fabian Socialist and Soviet Socialist occupation of America. And drop the C and put a K in there. 2020, Old Earth calendar. Damn it, Jim. I'm a doctor, not a... Oh, wait a minute, I guess... Well, give me a brick, Mason. I just fixed that hordeless cement. And then 2020, year of conflict, year of the Dance of Swords, and the battle begins. So, in fact, it's already started. Series of frontier operations taking place simultaneously. Houston, Austin... Needless to say, we have the Portland scam continuing as expected. Seattle, the panty waist as soon as the communists showed up at the mayor's door. They just collapsed is what they did. Spineless curs, all. That's the one thing about those that are making a deal with the communists. They find out there is no deal. What a surprise. I would never have expected... Oh, wait a minute, we told you about that. In fact, we've pretty well told you, across the board, the Patriot Movement has been 100% correct with regard to the agenda, who's playing the game, and what the game is all about. So our first rule is shoot the bastard that's that bump behind the curtain. All the tentacles go from the bump to the Democrats and the Republicrats, and it's really funny. It's got like a strange bump on the top of its head, too. A little like a back plate or something on the top of the beaner. Behind the curtain, you can see it. It's like, you have to put 3 or 4 double quads on that one. Oh, wow, that's kind of fun. Anyway, and it finally falls for lack of energy there. No strength left to hold up. Man, you pretty well cut it in 2. The bump isn't going to be a problem after a while. We're not worried about the organic sandbags they're pushing. We'll deal with them. The important thing is we do with them what they thought they were going to do with everybody else in their kind of red terror, super window of activity to grab everybody. When the enemy comes out, that's when you grab them. Just think about that one. How many conversations can you have with the ones you keep that will tell you about the ones you're after next? Hunt them harder than they think they are hunting you. We've gotten technology grabs. I mean, there's some stuff that I didn't even believe they would be stupid enough to do what they did, but sure as hell they did. We were looking for a certain nest for a certain technology, their see-through technology from the air, and the fools virtually drank the Kool-Aid. So, got them. Bingo. Guys, you can do a lot of work like that in advance in preparation for what's coming next. That way, when the time comes, you sortie out, get rid of that problem, along with any other associated ones, and the battle's pretty well joined. Communications. For the longest time, when you first get in the military, they tell you all about how everybody on the other side is always stupid, except that, then you find out after a while, wait a minute, maybe it's not stupid. Let me give you an example. The Russians are really dumb because they use flag signals for their tank crews, and they don't use their radios as much. Okay, well, our big brag up, you might recall, was that we were going to use electronic countermeasures, and we were going to jam this and violate that and block whatever. Can't really block flag signals, can you? So the Russian solution was actually a wise one based on the idea that we were going to spend overwhelmingly massive gobs of money on electronic countermeasures that would really be useless if the enemy was willing to continue to operate without the technology that you were trying to block. See, first you have to buy into the measures, countermeasures, which, by the way, if you're smart, and we are too, what you do is you buy into it enough so that the bad guys continue down a track that is useless to the overall campaign. And then in the process, you have other solutions. This is one of the most common mistakes everybody's making. We've got to have our cell phones. The cell phones are radio transceivers, guys. They're just 800 meg radio transceivers. They're not phones. Phone, as you would know it, a ground line with copper wire or fiber optic later on going from point A to point B is a fixed, rigid system where you have personal communications processes. You can do join points like we have the conference line, but for the most part it's one-on-one, point-to-point signal communications, and it's hardline wired. you're dealing, when you have a cell phone in hand, you have basically the advancements all made by private developments, mostly, again, in the ham operator or in the independent radio operator circles, which eventually were, sold to the industry in one form or another. Your cell phone is basically packet radio. That's all it is. It's packet radio. Go look up packet radio. Understand that, well, don't we give it a different name? We're calling it a cell phone. It's packet radio. That's all it is. Okay, so here's the thing. We've had this, and again, the private side has had most of the cutting-edge technology first, and then one way or another, it's either stolen, scarfed, or, sold by whoever it is that, developed it. The government will steal a lot of stuff. I mean, it typically, again, it's really the Jewish mob, the oi boys, the lucre chasers, usually are the ones who will try to murder somebody so they can steal something like that first. Of course, if you're smart, you're already prepared for that. When they send somebody out, you keep them. Then when they send another batch out to look for the first batch, you keep them, and they kind of figure out maybe you actually are hunting them harder than they're hunting you. That has happened in the past. It's kind of like all of these whistleblowers where, if whistleblower Schmidlap or Vilma were killed because, what, they didn't take the job seriously? If you're going to be a whistleblower, you need to automatically be in, hunt mode. In fact, like I've said, you even want to set things up so that you kind of bring them in so it's a little less of a surprise when the time comes. That way you can do what you want with whatever's sent. Well, we're professional and blah, blah. Hey, no matter who they send, no matter who it is, you do realize they die just like anyone else, or they can suffer just like anybody else, and you make it as expensive for them as they thought they were going to make it for you. That's how you defend. And you give them the opportunity. Hey, they're equal opportunity dying time. Just, again, progressively, things to think about here. Now, the bad guys have been in motion with communications, manipulation for a long, 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 long time. Everybody's lamenting about the social media. I think Facebook is on the edge of, how far can it go and how much more could it stack on before the amount of BS data that it's collecting is of any value. I mean, it's really of any value. If you're saturated to the point with millions, tens of millions, and tens of millions, everybody goes, well, they're collecting all this data. If most of it is spiders and, J-Doggy and Yo, what up, doe, and there's a whole bunch of other clutter in between, I mean, how valuable is that? In reality, how much actual matter or junk is out there, kind of like chaff, that, sure, the artificial intelligence can waddle through, but can it really pick it out? I mean, let me give you an example. How many different ways can you actually transfer information? Here's what you do. You go to a server site where you've got all kinds of options to go search for things. You search certain things. Then you go through and you actually tap out different images. And we talk about old packet radio, kind of did this when you typed out a packet radio signal. But you can take a number of images and go from point and, back and forth through the whole of the process and, of the images, and actually map out a coding system that absolutely nobody can break. It's a phonetic code. It allows you to transmit and throw junk into the enemy's machine while actually passing on additional information. Wow, check out all of these things, and you send it to somebody else, and you have, oh my God, spiders and flies and widgets and lederhosen and glockenspiels and, Singto Almatanga and Chao Hong Bang Dang Gai Hey. And in reality, you're passing all of these images back and forth, but they're representing something else. In fact, there's no way to really be sure how that something else is passed on. The social media and the search engines and all the cool stuff that your enemy provides gives you the tools and ammunition that you need to throw the battlefield to even greater frenzy and make more confusion and more wasted storage space for that vast, artificial intelligence that sees everything. Well, what if it sees everything, but there's nothing of value?
There's nothing to grab but smoke.
Yeah, it's like, what do you do now?
Hey, Dad, I just wanted to come up while you were talking about communications. One of the guys posted a really good video in Discord last week. I just reposted it. I think it was from Warhead 2. He's one of our listeners in Oklahoma. It's on Cubas gaming network, underground gaming network, which, Cubans, they don't have internet the way we do, so they have to steal it. What they've done there and what they're showing is what Seattle Wireless did that the FCC attacked them for, that they can't talk about anymore. They're still doing it, but they're doing it more clandestine, being careful who they let into the group. But if you want an idea, if you want an idea of the technology and how to spread stuff out, and that we're talking about, it's Cuba, so everything is crude and rude and about as bare minimal as you can get. Like their antenna mast is an old TV antenna on somebody's roof with a tire rim, bolted to the roof of the building, which is their antenna for sending out Wi-Fi, and then they have their own cable, which is just about any Ethernet or telephone cable they can get their hands on. They've stretched out all over the place to wire up their neighborhoods, and they're just doing it for gaming. That's one thing that I've told a lot of people about who don't understand it. As far as the internet goes, as long as there are gamers out there that have computers, the gamers will find a way to keep the internet going. They really will. It's that necessity, it's that addiction that they've got to scratch, so they will find a way to make it work, And
it will, of course, assist us all, because remember, you can shadow in any of these technologies, work in them constantly, and there's no reason not to, and have fun in the process. Yeah, we're just playing a game. See how that works? So, again, one of the most important things here is you need to start local. How did the phone system start? How did the Internet start? Go look up ARPANET. If you want to understand what we've been doing with UltraNet, Hallmark, and Golden Spike, and like it's talking about the Seattle, or the Cubans, or for that matter around the planet, scavenging whatever old Earth technology you can, remember that ARPANET, go look at the dates and the window of activity, and then look at the technology that they had off the shelf to work with. Now, understand that there's this window of time when everybody talks about PCs, but not everybody jumped into PCs right away. All the old Earth IBM technology, and some of it really was on the edge of being personal computer tech, which was already out there and being surplused by any number of different both companies and governmental institutions. Now, even though that they would only trash part of it, the components that people were able to scavenge advanced them so that they could then focus on home building the difference, what they needed to make the rest of the system work. Always remember that. Take advantage of whatever is off the shelf. This is how people prototype, okay? For the longest time, before you guys had LEDs like we do now and everything. I mean, I got an M&M's fan here with an LED psychedelic center spinner, fidget spinner, and a bunch of other stuff like that. Well, guys, it used to be for prototyping, you would go to the hardware and look at all the latest stuff coming in from China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Japan, and you would pilfer all of the goodies that you saw, a blinking light system that had a certain sequencer. And between the sequencers and the other parts that you'd steal, you could build something else. One of the things that happened, here's a fun one for you, a circuit sequencer for switching out so that you would have the older ones. The present technology is now microchip, but still the same principle. You have a sequencer that divides and does different combinations of LED lights. You hit one combination, whatever. Guys, that's where the original scanners came from. Scavenging from a Hong Kong circuit board, a handful of smatter technology like this, from pieces here, pieces there, all over. And again, privately offering a relatively crude, but actually still just as sophisticated as anything today. It's just simply purpose-built now. Not as pretty, but, in other words, I won't say, one step away from crude and rude, but then again, crude and rude worked. And a frequency scanner that allowed you to monitor all of whatever was on a VHF or UHF band, that was expected to be performed, up and down the dial. You had variable rheostats and pots on board. You adjusted the bandwidth that you wanted to monitor, and then that little circuit system took over and actually would benchmark and then ID the frequency, because you had other subsystems that were attached with another thing I mentioned earlier, the earliest of packet radio, utilizing an onboard attached discriminator system that basically was a small computer. So all this technology, if just a matter of what path you have to get to, what road do you have to take, what direction do you have to go to get to the same location. How much more complicated is it? Well, it's a matter, and is it worth it? Well, depending upon your application, it certainly is. And again, in this case, like Ed said, it could be war gamers, or video game, game players. But the game player technology offers you an entire realm to what we do. It's called patter communications. Okay. I can go back and forth between different images, stack up a series of images, or perform a series of actions, forward, backward, left, right, left, right, left. Pay attention to my character. Left, right, left, right, left, step, stop. Oh, by the way, fire arrow, fire arrow, fire arrow. Now, it looks like normal motion, although it might be rather inane, but there's a lot of inane activity going on in all of these alternate world games. So in reality, you could be performing an action kind of like that Russian tank commander using those flags I mentioned earlier, where it really can't be seen or heard without understanding that you should be paying attention in the first place. Even if you do, what does it mean? It's all a phonetic code. Layers upon layers, plans within plans, circles within circles. Think about it. How many different ways can you be creative and, if need be, devious? The other side doesn't have its way completely. They are pressing to try and get everybody to lay down. That's one of the big things about all of the garbage I'm seeing right now. It's not that it's futile to resist. I mean, come on, look at the punks that you have to deal with that are the organic sandbags that are in front of you. Now, we get into a kickoff on this. First of all, here's one thing that I will say, though. Don't underestimate the value of a bullet going through the air. Well, they really look stupid, and they don't really have pretty guns. I've told you a million times. Like I said, once that bullet leaves that muzzle, it knows no friend. And just because they don't look as cool as you would expect them to, although I don't know, government troops wear black. Like I said, all the Black Lives Matter, they're wearing black. All the Antifa, they wear black. All of the Kill All the White People crew, they wear black. I mean, come on, they're all on the same team. You know what the difference between the federal employees are wearing black and all the cops wearing black and the Antifa and BLM and the Kill All the White People crew are? Well, there isn't any. They're both getting their money from the same place. It's all coming from the international bankers, playing them from one direction, playing them from the other, and if they have their way in 90 days, in less than 90 days right now, well, approximately 90 days, well, it is the 4th, well, the cops will be told that they have to follow the orders of the communists. Do you think that, well, let me ask you something here. Are the cops locally that you see there, are they unhappy with following the orders of the communists? Or are they unhappy with the fact that the communists gave them a few orders that they didn't like, and because it doesn't let them have as much fun as they normally would? Because they wouldn't care whether or not they beat on you, the patriot, or beat on you, the constitutionalist, or beat on you, the guy that believes in the Bill of Rights. They love that. They're just pissed about the communists because they've restricted how many toys they can play with while they're busy beating you down. But only for the moment, don't worry. The moment that they get full power, you know all these cops that are getting restricted right now? They're not going to be restricted at all. And you know what's going to happen? They're also not going to be complaining. And they won't quit. Communists in charge, all these cops and state cops, they'll be empowered again. They'll be even more empowered. I want you to think about that. All these federal agents, you see them, do you think they're going to be quitting left and right when the regime change comes? Or do you think they're all going to be, goose-stepping with the rest of the Soviets? Because, Red Square, dudes, Red Square. Yeah. They're just pissy because they can't use all the toys they got. They're not pissy because they keep doing the job, no matter what the communists give them in the way of an order. Look at Portland. Way before all this stuff happened for the last however many days. Portland's been in our inventory for how long now, guys? Portland has had the cops standing there watching Antifa block the traffic, beat people down, push people around, and the cops stand there, or like when our side, so to speak, anybody who's pro-patriot or not with Antifa, which is really anybody and everybody, step out in the street. Why, if Antifa attacks them and beats them down, the cops will stand down the road. But if all of a sudden Antifa / and BLM and black kill all the white people, start to get beat down, the cops show up there like white on rice. We've seen this for years now, decades. So I want to tell you where you think that somehow it's going to be, it's going to be special or different. Right now it's not special or different. Hell, they're having no problem in most all these locations. The commies are giving them orders, and they're following the communist orders just fine.
Hey, Mark.
Go ahead, caller. Jump in there. Who do we have?
This is Todd Denner, Orlando. I've talked to you before about gold and silver. I wanted to talk about CB radio since it's Communication Tuesday.
Yes, go right ahead.
It used to be back in the 70s and I guess probably 80s that each major metropolitan area used to have an established CB club where you could go there and you could, pay like a monthly due, and they would give you a 3-digit prefix. So when you got on the radio, you would say, for example, if the name that you were using was Jackrabbit, okay, you would say, yeah, this is Jackrabbit 357. Okay. Now, they don't have the CB clubs anymore like they used to, but if you listen to CB radio, and when there's some skip or at nighttime when you're getting a lot of, if you've got a decent antenna, if you're getting a lot of noise from all around the country, you will still hear people say what their handle is, and then, if they're an established CBer and they've got a decent amp and they're pushing their voice out throughout the United States, they also give a 3-digit number. And what I wanted to ask you is, how are people establishing the 3-digit number? What does it refer to? And if someone's a new CBer, is there a way to get one officially, or are people just making it up?
Actually, I don't know if that held over from original Citizens Band district radio, because back in the 60s and actually going back to the 50s, Citizens Band radio was a different grid, number one, but it basically had the same premise. Of course, they wanted to sell everybody licenses, and they wanted to know where everybody was. And those Citizen Band elements, as we've talked about over the years, are still in place. Now, how many locations, I don't know, but I would assume that the FCC must have, and the Civil Defense must have some of the information on that. I just don't know how much. As far as the numbers go, I would assume that the code was actually, you had for instance, you would have an association president and staff, which I know they did, different groups did. And basically, you were in the logbook, and so you received, it could be number 001, or, going right up through the rest of the call number numbers. Whether or not they had thousands, which I would assume in the larger metropolitan areas they did, would determine whether or not you went with a 3- or 4-digit number eventually. You could reestablish it. It'd just be a matter of doing an association or a club. I would do it more as an association, but club would work. And you could actually just start a logbook back up again. What you do is, you identify yourself. Part of the overlap with that, remember, with Citizens Band Radio in the second generation, which started in the 70s, you still had CB licenses. And so a lot of people, what they did is, they paid the $10 for the CB license, they got a number back, and then they passed that information on to the club, and then they were given an association or club number. I would figure that would correspond perhaps even with a signal code ID for the CB license. I never bothered with one. A couple of times we actually had the forms, and everybody said, well, you need to get a CB license. Like, well, I don't think so. There's so many thousands of people that I know that are operating without it, and everybody had a CB in their card, pretty much no matter who you were. So it kind of faded out to a degree, but it was a good way, kind of like a friendly association drivers club, because remember, that was the big thing, is using it for transportation security, for safety. And sure. It could be done again. I would have to look up. I think the place to look, first of all, would be the FCC's
1, 2, 3. Dad, it could be done again, but again, you just mentioned the organization that I was going to bring up as why it's a bad idea. The FCC, look at what they did with ham radios. Ham radio operators, they turned them on themselves. Ham radio operators, when somebody's arrested by the FCC, they weren't tracked down or busted by the FCC. They were tracked down and busted by other ham operators who got that I'm a good junior G-man, license, and anybody else who uses this, even though it's airwaves, even though, technically it's supposed to be free for everybody, if you'd use it without it, the Gestapo license holders will come after you.
Right. Well, no, I'm not promoting going for the license. I'm just saying, if you want to understand how they did it, the big thing here again, too, is just as an example of how it would be abused is what we see with ham operators who are getting fewer in number and longer in age. Pilots, with every year we have more pilots dying, and the average age of the pilots that have licenses in America goes up. There's nothing on the horizon that's going to alleviate that. Eventually they're going to kill off most of private aviation in America. There'll be more private pilots overseas in bushwhack countries out in the middle of nowhere as opposed to the United States. We got plenty of planes, and they're all parked. The same is true with the radio, with Citizens Band radio. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It was so flooded that eventually the FCC had to throw their hands up in the air because nobody was really, coming at it from we need to control it and restrict it. What happened is that most of the associations you're talking about were there for, again, club fun. In other words, you knew everybody, you come in, do a meetup, everybody have a potluck. Nobody does that anymore, hardly. And so it was a different, it mutated into a very different creature. But as far as how they came about, if you were looking at the history, there should be something with the FCC about how and what criteria they had, and it was a way for them to try and restrict us. I'm sure the government doesn't do anything to find more freedom. They're only interested in how they can control. The good thing about it would be is that friendly associations could be established for the sake of knowing who's who in the zoo if you need help. Like I said, that's really where it came in. And where it stayed for the longest time was as a way to assist, friendlies that you knew.
It should be done on an individual group level. Like you're operating in Michigan, you should have a Michigan with your unit operator's number. That way, when somebody is operating with your unit, that number is associated with you, but you don't have to go to anybody to get an official. You are the official in that case. You are the authority. You don't need anybody else's permission or maybe an example on how to do it, but you don't need anybody else's permission or anybody else's handshake to approve what you've done.
Yeah, that's obvious, but the reason I brought it up is because if you go, and this is just my personal experience, if you go on a ham or a CB base station, and let's say your CB base station goes from 24 to 32 megahertz, and you start talking to people on 12 meter or on CB, or you go over on the 10 meter, even if you do have a ham license, okay? One thing I've noticed is that if you're talking to someone who is an old trucker who would know something about this, if there's one group of people that are so snobby that they don't want to talk to you at all about this, it's truckers. And if they've been a trucker for decades and they're on CB radio and they have a setup in their house and they are they've got an amp, and they're talking to people that are states away. They only want to talk to other truckers. It's too bad, but that's just how it is. And I think one of the reasons that is because ham radio operators have been so snide about CB operators over the year that even though some ham operators will extend a hand out to CB operators and say, why don't you come over to our side to get your ham license, and that way you can open up to the whole band from 10 all the way up to 160. And they just don't want to do that. They're stuck on CB radio, and they're going to stay there forever, and they don't want to talk to anybody except old truckers. And those are the only people I've found that I can really get this information from, because it's the old truckers that are the ones that have that 3-digit code. And as of yet, I've even talked to ham operators. I'm like, what is this 3-digit code? And they're like, it's something they used back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and then that was it. You know, some of these ham operators, I think there's like 700,000 of them in the United States that are licensed, I don't think that's how many that are active. Mm-hmm. But I just haven't been able to find out the information to be able to get a 3-digit code just to say, this is my handle, this is my 3-digit code.
Well, with the truck drivers, and Dad knows this, we have a lot of truck drivers in the family. One of the places where that 3-digit code came from it's very simple. You have you have something on the back of your truck that every vehicle has. And it's an identifier that way when other people see it, they know what it is. So when you give out that handle and you give out that 3-digit number, if somebody sees it, they know who they're talking to on the road, kind of like looking at a face. Part of the 3-digit code is your license plate.
Okay.
Yeah, it depended upon
I've never heard that. That's the first time I heard that.
Yeah, it depends on the era, you see. And again, that's one of the ththings. The overlap was the old CB network, which in reality was tied into, Citizens Band was tied into the idea that I've been promoting for the longest time, we've been talking about for years, is setting up a separate phone system. Thinking about it, their logic was it would be more like a telegraph back in the day. That's what Citizens Band, that's where it would have been to try and keep the airwaves clear because of, battlefield clutter. And the Citizens Band, if you look at the old CB command centers, the way they were, not CB, for civil defense, CDs, Charlie Delta. The CD, civil defense systems, had operators in each one of the categories of radio communications that were already predetermined. And it was all crude and rude. It was very simple. Everybody expected to be Star Wars and, whatever. And it was very, very simple, very minimalist. And the logic here was that, you would walk up and go, okay, I'm over here at Civil Defense Station number 10. I'm trying to get hold of Margaret Schmidlap in, Tulsa. And I'm in Oak City outside of Tulsa, maybe 70, 80 miles away. The logic is that those radios in an emergency situation would become the equivalent to a telegraph system. You would send a message out, the operator would receive it at another end as part of the grid. They could talk locally in the grid, but mostly it was to get messages out, receive messages back, and then you could go back up to the operator and say, hey, did we find anything out? Hold on here a second. Who are you again? What was the code number I gave you? And they go through the log and they go, okay, yep, right here. I got a response from Tulsa, 1600 hours. This is what they said. In fact, hold on, let me write this down for you. Here's a little slip. There's what they said, and if you want to respond, let me know. Well, that was the original idea behind all of the radio nets, is that it would replace what would be the fractured telephone system, and whatever would be left in the ground wire system would be taken over by the Fed anyway. So this gave us some form of intercommunication, plus it also allowed government to restrict communication when they had it through a central system like that. So, and of course there were special people. I guess the problem with it is abuse would be just like our muzzle wearers. We have the muzzle police now, where they, let me ask everybody something. Look at just how hairball and crazy a bunch of nimwits and nimrods and idiot sticks have now become dog muzzle / mask police. And they didn't even, we don't even have a license for that. You know what I mean?
Pulling guns on people.
Right, what gets me about this is that's an example of where once you start a licensing system or you start a special, club system up, it becomes the us and them scenario where we're special. I'm, in the pecking order, I'm special, you're not. That's the only thing we got to watch out for, which typically, again, the government counts on. It's like you said, the ham operators. Any problem that's going to exist is going to be the ham operators, like Ed said, or the licensed characters, who, by the way, are a little click, anal retentive. They're going to become, well, of course it depends, but as they get older, they're going to become more introvert. They hate new. They hate anybody else, that's outside their sphere, and so the government uses that. And especially if you think about it, look at the group that would be replacing the people that presently are in the system, if you think about this, that have some decorum. Look at the frothing at the mouth, bug-eyed crazies, and think about them with a little bit of wherewithal then going into radio. I mean, every aspect of our system.
Association of the Airwaves.
Yeah, think about this is why, like I said, we're at the point we got to put an end to this. We're going to have to shoot them. I'm not going to live with this, and I don't think anybody really wants to. Most people are fed up with it already, but understand, every aspect of what we're talking about will be contaminated and progressively cross-contaminated with this Sovietization. It's what happened in Russia. It didn't happen all at once. That's the one thing everybody thinks it was like a light switch. Progressively, step by step by step. I talked to a lot of guys that were in Germany at the end of World War II that were became East Germany. And it didn't switch over like, boom, all of a sudden the communists were in charge. It took 3 to 7 years, depending upon the subject. Now, communications they hammered on very quickly, but they still didn't have total communications control until 1949. In 1945, the communists basically walked over Eastern Europe. But, for instance, in Germany, and you would think, well, hell, the Russians were vicious enemies with the Germans, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, but it's still a country and a vast country, and by the way, they had to try to garner cooperation. So what they did is they got people to do exactly what we're talking about, licensing, and then they started towing in the license, and then they carved off a bunch of people, and they made it illegal, and then they, of course, made it, a crime, and then you had the other licensees help to run down and destroy anybody else who was free and independent.
Yeah, speaking of legality, that's another question I wanted to ask you. Officially, with a CB radio, you're not supposed to use more than 4 watt output. We know, though, that people who have base stations put foot warmers on there to boost their signal. The question I have is, I have a Galaxy 2527, and right out of the box, if you have it here in the United States, technically it's export only, and so technically it is illegal because this is the low watt version at 10 watts.
Right.
And as soon as you key up on 10 watts, you're already operating illegally. Now, officially, it's illegal, but
it's illegal to operate it. It's not illegal to own it. And when it is operated, the FCC will come out and they will confiscate the equipment, or they will try to, if you let them. If you admit to the equipment being yours, that it's yours, you are operating it, they'll file charges against you. Until you do that, the equipment is guilty, and they will charge the equipment.
Good information. So
right. In fact, hold on. You were building up to a question, though, so go ahead, please.
Okay, so I bought an RCI 2950 from a guy up in North Carolina. He's got an eBay store, and this guy's been a ham operator since 76. And I asked him, I said, what upgrades can you do on this radio to, boost it up? And already the radio out of the box on AM, I think it's like 10 watts AM and then 25 watts single sideband TEP. So he told me, he says, I'm going to change the finals out, and I'm going to do some things into radio to boost it up to 25 watts AM and 55 watts single sideband. And he said that will be enough to drive I mean, 10 watts really is enough to drive an amp, but he said that will be enough to drive like a Texas Star Sweet 16, which I also have. So he told me when he was on the radio, he said, look, I want you to understand that this is an export radio only, and legally you can only go on the 11-meter, 40 channels. You can only go on those on a CB radio sold here in the United States that has a 4-watt chip. But he told me, he says, look, in an emergency, okay, if the president declares an emergency or if the governor comes out and declares an emergency, that law is suspended. And you can use whatever wattage you want to on the 40 channels at any wattage if you're using it for emergency purposes.
Right. Well, the biggest balance of power thing here is going to be whether or not they're going to outlaw signal communications or whether or not they're going to continue to allow it in an emergency or crisis or wartime environment, or again, what we're talking about most recently here, again, for, we've been discussing this for decades, is a ground war inside the United States. If there's going to be a tightrope, balancing act for the regime, if they want to keep the population, they can't piss on everything. On the other hand, if things are going to hell in a handcart, we can assume that they're going to target and try to attack anybody who has alternate or, signal communications of any kind that has any flare or signature. In other words, strong output. The balancing act is, or we should say, not even balancing act. Initially, there's such a clutter of other operators. The Mexicans, for instance, you may have noticed this. You get, towards the sunset, you start hearing more Spanish. Then you realize the Spanish isn't even coming from your backyard. It's somewhere in, New Mexico with the bounce, or, Arizona, northern Mexico, et cetera, et cetera. And the government does nothing about it, even if it's operating inside the United States, for now.
Yeah. Right now, we're not in the...
There's an awful lot of them out in the Gulf of Mexico running big linears and overwhelming everybody.
Right. Well, but they're not just on the Gulf of Mexico. That's true. They're out on the water, but a lot of them are on land and driving down the road right amongst us right now. I mean, you can tell as you develop your ear for signal communications, you can tell when you're being pounded and it's local. When you're being hit hard and it's just, like you said, 25, 50 watt. Could have a linear 50 watt linear amplifier on it, 100 watt. I've got 25, a 50, and 100 sitting here. I don't have the 100 hooked up to anything right now. Now, if I put my beams up, which the beams that I have here are not up right now, I just went over them a couple days ago. But if I put the beams up wherever I decide to put them up, I'd put that 100-watt linear on that, and I'm going to be I'll have a select signal. I probably wouldn't do omnidirectional in the future with a 100-watt or 50-watt linear because it's going to be...
know who you are and where you are.
Right, it's a bullet magnet. The only thing we do with that is, like, we have signal generators that are emergency shortwave that are very dirty. They would be up and down the spectrum. They'd be doing AM, FM. They'd be, they'd be everywhere. And we assume that their lifespan is going to be only anywhere from, it depends on how long it takes for them to get something to go bomb it. You know what I mean? But these arrays are large. I mean, actually, we've got them dotted all over the state of Michigan because Michigan would be optimal for talking to the planet. I'm amazed that we don't have more shortwave here on the Michigan peninsulas. We have metal underneath us, and we have water for that first bounce all the way around just about. And it's interesting. Government does. We know where all of the government signal sites are for shortwave and broad spectrum communications. They're pretty obvious because they still need to have the same arrays and antennas that everybody else does. But as far as restricting or worrying about whether or not they're going to come after us, basically that's why we have that power down switch. Blend in with the background. Use the power for when you got to punch through a lot of trash, and especially if it's not so much other signals like other CB radios as clutter and background because of battlefield transmissions, and again additional harmonics from all kinds of other junk the government has. If they turn everything on, the radio spectrum up and down the dial is going to be dirty. There's junk. I mean, example, we already have. Even when we do sonar in the water, we drive whales crazy and beach them because of how many different overlapping frequencies are used and how damaging they are to organic life in the water there. They don't want to talk about it, but I'm sure that's what that was. We've seen it more than a few times, and it's always when they're running certain technologies. The same is going to be true with all the rest of the crap they run. They're not that worried about filtering their equipment. So the reason we're going to need more power is to punch through the background noise. Plus, we get some nukes going on. We got other technology that the other side, both sides don't want to talk about, or everybody doesn't want to talk about, mostly in the Tesla junk. Your basic communications is going to be nice to have that extra power when the time comes, just to get a basic signal through.
Well, I can tell you this, Mark. I go on eBay every day and I look for amplifiers, and there was 2 of them last week that came up. One of them is one I've been looking for a long time, and it finally came up on eBay. It was the old 1990s Galaxy 2000 watt amplifier. It was a tube amplifier. The guy put it up there for starting the auction at $300. And this guy does not understand how an auction works. The price doesn't start going up until the last 24 hours. And I was like, cool, we got a 7-day auction. It's in my watch list. I would have paid $700-800 for that amp, even in the condition it was in. Some guy messaged him, and all of a sudden it was not for sale anymore, and some guy offered him $390, and the seller accepted it. Unbelievably. Same thing happened a day later with one of the old midnight specials. A guy put the top of the line midnight special up there. It was a 750 watt. Put it up there for, somebody got it before the auction ended for like $425. So
right, make offer, where you have the make offer, and it's like, hey, we'll just settle this right now.
Those didn't even have a make offer. That's what I'm saying.
Huh.
Is that people who are not into CB radios are running out of money, so they go and start picking stuff up out of the closet and say, I wonder how much this will sell for. Oh, you're going to give me $400? Sold. Whereas if they had waited 7 days, they might have gotten double or triple the price. Those midnight specials, even the 250 watts, would be going for $400 or $500. But this guy had a 750, sold it for $425. Ridiculous. So, what my point is that people are looking for serious foot warmers because they know that it's possible that if we run into any situation where the communications are broken down, they can rely on their CB radio, and they want to be heard. And although I have a Sweet 16, it's in my van, I don't have one for my Galaxy 2527. So on AM, I'm only operating on 10 watts, which is fine for local rag chew. I've got a Stereo 827 antenna, which works really well. But, for emergency purposes, I'd like to have, an extra 400 or 500 watts in here. So I'm still looking for one.
Well, one of the things again, you brought it up, is if we're looking at the situation where you're under attack, okay, everybody's grabbing their cell phone. The cell phone, certainly, you can do a committee call, a conference call. There's a bunch of things you can do. But there's nothing like getting on the radio, especially once you have that group and association and friendlies, where if you put the call out, it's going out everywhere. Not just one person is going to hear it. Anybody and everybody. Maybe some people you don't want to hear it, but then who cares? If it's a crisis situation, it doesn't make any difference. And that's one of the things why government doesn't have a problem with cell phones, but does have a problem with radio. See, cell phones are narrow and very, very narrow and specific. Fixed frequency radios are fairly narrow in theory, but as we pointed out, they can be opened up and they can be altered so they can do a lot of unique things. However, you have to have the other friends doing the other unique things in order to make those systems work beyond their limited capacity of, like CB radio, 40 channels. Now, we do have that advance because now we have, like you said, upper and lower sidebands. So, again, do the numbers. 3 times. We have 3 times as many frequency options as we had, say, in 1975. Although single sideband was already there, it was only for those people who knew how to tweak radios. Today, that's a standard feature. I'm sorry, repeat what we're talking.
Sorry. If you have a competent CV technician that can peek to and align your CV, they should also be able to modify it to where instead of speaking on channel 23, you're speaking on channel 23 and a half.
Right.
Because if someone has another CB and you're on that frequency, they can hear you speaking, but they won't be able to understand what you're saying. And if you're speaking to another person who has a CB that is modified that way, you can speak to them, but the people out there with a scanner or a CB won't be able to hear you. That doesn't mean that the government won't be able to understand what you're saying, and you can just be as reckless as you want to on the radio. But it does cut out a lot of people listening to what you say if you alter the kilohertz step in your frequencies so that you can speak to friendlies, whereas people who are not so friendly, they shouldn't be hearing what you're saying anyway.
Exactly. Again, the big advantage here is that with most of the technologies that are out there now, there's a lot of other program options. The disadvantage is that it's, again, microprocessor. There have been a lot of other, a lot of people that have been tweaking. Certainly people can reprogram microprocessors, guys, or open up certain components of software that are available. But the big thing there is susceptibility to damage. And the positive, you can program a whole bunch of chips to do the same thing. You've got a group who are talking in their own sphere of interest without external interference from people that you didn't want to hear from or have hear you. And then you still have the ability to shift out to any number of other alternative technologies that you've opened up with the same radio. So the big thing here, again, is you have to have friends. That's something you brought up actually from the beginning. You have to start working at developing and promoting allies. And they need to be on the same page. You need to have the same interests. That's why, like I said, it's weird. I keep bringing this up. Guys, you're figuring out real quick who you do and don't want to deal with now that we have the dog muzzle thing going on. And free and independent people aren't wearing the dog muzzle. For the people that are kind of like, at the very, very least, not really all that tough on the spine, they don't have a real stiff spine, the dog muzzle's out there in force with them. So this one of the many things you use to judge who do I want in my camp or in my circle. That's just something to think about when you're looking at people and who do I bring into this. The enemy has provided us with some very useful tools now that we didn't have before that would have been made things a little more questionable. So just something to think about. And again, when we're using radio communications, the other thing, as you pointed out, okay, nice to know what everybody's doing because that way you can throw up a little camouflage and at least blend in for the most part. I think one of the biggest things that's going to be important to remember down the road, most people aren't going to be worrying about licenses anyway, though they may still use and should use radio courtesy. And because of that, if you actually just maintain some decorum, you still blend in fairly well and don't raise a flag. And nobody's going to have enough time in the world to monitor all of the additional radio traffic that would take over if, say, the internet and cell phone systems were down. Because, as I've said, it wouldn't take long for everybody to try and find a place to satiate their addiction. Okay? The internet is an addiction. The cell phones are an addiction. And if everybody's been conditioned to this instant gratification thing, if they can't get it in one direction, they will start looking in others.
Your CB operators are typically a more hardened group of people anyway.
Right.
So, and most of those people are on the right. You don't have any liberals or leftists on CB radio because they think it's beneath them.
Right.
So,
exactly.
It'd be a good idea, though, right now, if you do have a vehicle, you should already have a CB radio of some kind in it. And even if you don't want to talk on the CB radio, it's good to have it on and listen to get used to the lingo. Because when the crap hits the fan, it's not like they're going to not be using the lingo. They are going to be using the lingo, and if you're used to it, you can understand what they're saying. And it's important to know what they're saying because 99% of your time spent on CB radio is going to be listening because you want to know what people are saying in different parts of the immediate 100 miles where you live, so that way if something comes up, you're like, oh, wow, I learned this on CB radio. I didn't hear it on the TV. The alert didn't come through my phone, but I did hear it on CB radio. So it's important to have it on. Even if you're on the computer listening in the background, you've got your computer right there, and you've got your base station over to the left with your Turner +3 desk mic, and most of the time you're just listening. You may not even jump on and talk, but to listen to it and to hear what's going on, especially when there's an emergency situation, that's going to be a good source of information, even though, like right now, I don't think there's any, it's not like the CIA is on CB radio spreading disinformation, but in an emergency situation, if they decide, hey, you know what, we should go on CB radio and spread some disinformation. Well, if you haven't been on CB radio for a couple decades and you don't understand the lingo, everybody that is on CB radio is going to understand, hey, this guy's a cop and he's spreading disinformation. So,
exactly.
I think that's probably what they will do.
Well, eventually you're going to have countermeasures and elements that will hit a switch and roll over into, like you said, disinformation technology. They're going to be trying to spread or at least create confusion. This is why having high confidence in the operator, even voice, okay, key in voice. I mentioned, for instance, the CB would be used as, the old Citizens Band was to be used as a telegraph. Operators and voices, especially, the more that your ear is tuned to the technology, the more likely it is you're going to pick out that even if somebody claims to be a certain operator, including a number, code, password, whatever you've got, that it is very clear very quickly that that's not the operator that should be attached to what was just transmitted. This is Bob Schmidlap, 402. Well, okay, and then after a little bit of dialogue, a very short intro, looking for telltales or keys that are typical with the conversation of that person, in other words, nuances, that's not Bob. What? Well, that's not Bob. Doesn't even really sound like Bob, but that's not Bob.
Because Bob said, hey, I'm going to be sitting here on the side, and if this guy doesn't say that after every time he keys off, well, then maybe that's not Bob.
Exactly. And this is where everybody always wonders, but it doesn't really think about it. Keyboard key operators, okay, we still use key with ham radio if you want to, but let's go back to telegraph. You've seen it a million times. Well, I don't know who that is, but that's not Bob. What do you mean? Well, that's not his key. Now, what do they mean by that? Well, the style and technique of each person, especially when you're tuned, when your brain is focused on a data stream, an information stream coming to you. It's amazing how much you pick up. And again, we've talked about this many times, the subconscious picks it up and registers it far before the conscious mind does. If you're really tuned in because you're focused, both are blending. And so that's where it's not a new idea, guys, but in this case with signal communications, no matter what it is, there are a number of different ways that you're going to be able to, at least to a limited degree, maintain operational security. And it may not be all that critical, and after all, we're just talking local communications and transmissions, but if somebody's trying to stir the pot and trying to move people in a certain way to a certain end, literally, then it's a really good idea to know who's who in the zoo. And again, to develop skills. By the way, we got to go to the top of the hour break. We are right where we're supposed to be, a little past. It is 6:03. Caller, close with me if you would. God bless the Republic.
Death to the New World Order.
We shall prevail, ladies and gentlemen. The empire is on the run.
We're on the march. That's not you say.
Hoorah. Thank you, sir. And again, for everybody, just stay where you are. We're going to take a little bit of a break, and we will be back for the second hour of the Intel Report. It's Communications Tuesday. I think we are communicating at you. Communicating. Anyway, we'll be back.
Good night, Admiral!
Plant the seed in our homeland, boys. Let it grow where all can see. Feed it with our devotion, boys. Call it the Liberty Tree.
I remember a teacher that I had. Now, I went through the 7th grade. I went to the 7th grade. And I left home when I was 10 years old because I was hungry. And this is true. I work in the summer and I go to school in the winter. But I had this one teacher. He was the principal of the Harrison School in Vincennes, Indiana. To me, this was the greatest teacher, a real sage of my time, anyhow. He had such wisdom. And we were all reciting the Pledge of Allegiance one day. And he walked over, this little old teacher. Mr. Laswell was his name. Mr. Laswell. He says, He says, I've been listening to you boys and girls recite the Pledge of Allegiance all semester, and it seems as though it's becoming monotonous to you. If I may I recite it and try to explain to you the meaning of each word. I, me, an individual, a committee of one, pledge. Dedicate all of my worldly goods to give without self-pity. Allegiance, my love and my devotion. To the flag, our standard, Old Glory, a symbol of freedom. Wherever she waves, there's respect, because your loyalty has given her a dignity that shouts, freedom is everybody's job. United. That means that we have all come together. States, individual communities that have united into 48 great states. 48 individual communities with pride and dignity and purpose. All divided with imaginary boundaries, yet united to a common purpose. And that's love for country. And to the Republic, a state in which sovereign power is invested in representatives chosen by the people to govern. And government is the people. And it's from the people to the leaders, not from the leaders to the people, for which it stands. One nation, meaning so blessed by God, indivisible, incapable of being divided, with liberty, which is freedom, the right of power to live one's own life without threats, fear, or some sort of retaliation. And justice, the principle or qualities of dealing fairly with others. For all, which means, boys and girls, it's as much your country as it is mine. And now, boys and girls, let me hear you recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Since I was a small boy, 2 states have been added to our country, and 2 words have been added to the Pledge of Allegiance: under God. Wouldn't it be a pity if someone said that is a prayer and that would be eliminated from schools too?
Liberty's Guardian, Guns and Ammunition, a family-owned business located in the heart of Ohio's hunting country. Let us help you find the right shotgun or rifle for you. Or if you're looking for a pistol or concealed carry, we have a nice selection of compact and subcompact pistols for that too. Check it.
I had a dream the other night that, well, I didn't understand. A figure walked in through the mist with a flintlock in his hand. His clothes were torn and dirty as he stood there by my bed. He took off his 3-cornered hat, and speaking low to me, he said, "We fought a revolution to secure our liberty. We wrote the Constitution as a shield from tyranny. For future generations, this legacy we gave. In this, the land of the free and home of the brave. The freedoms we secured for you, we'd hoped you'd always keep. But tyrants labored endlessly while your parents were asleep. Your freedom's gone, your courage lost. You're no more than a slave. In this, the land of the free and home of the brave. You buy permits to travel and permits to own a gun, permits to start a business or to build a place for one. On land that you believe you own, you pay a yearly rent, although you have no voice in saying how the money's spent. Your children must attend a school that doesn't educate, and your Christian values can't be taught according to the state. You read about the current news in a regulated press, and you pay a tax you do not owe to please the IRS. Your money is no longer made of silver nor of gold. You trade your wealth for paper so your life can be controlled. You pay for crimes that make our nation turn from God and shame. You've taken Satan's number. You've traded in your name. You've given government control to those who do you harm so they could burn down churches and seize the family farm and keep our country deep in debt, put men of God in jail, harass your fellow countrymen while corrupted courts prevail. Your public servants don't uphold the solemn oaths they've sworn, and your daughters visit doctors so their children won't be born. Your leaders send artillery and guns to foreign shores and send your sons to slaughter fighting other people's wars. Can you regain the freedoms for which we fought and died? Or don't you have the courage or the faith to stand with pride? And are there no more values for which you will fight to save? Or do you wish your children to live in fear and be a slave? O sons of the Republic, arise, take a stand. Defend the Constitution, the supreme law of the land. Preserve our great republic and each God-given right. And pray to God to keep the torch of freedom burning bright. As I awoke, he'd vanished in the mist from whence he came. His words were true. We are not free, but we have ourselves to blame. For even now as tyrants trample each God-given right, we only watch and tremble, too afraid to stand and fight. If he stood by your bedside in a dream while you were asleep and wondered what remains of the freedoms he'd fought to keep, what would be your answer if he called out from the grave? Is this still the land of the free and home of the brave? God bless you, and God bless this republic.
And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the second hour of the Afternoon Intelligence Report. I'm Mark Kornke. One day closer to victory for all of our brothers and sisters, both on and behind the lines in occupied territories, southwest, east, northeast, and west. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to us on Libertytreeradio.4mg.com, AM and FM micro stations, CB base stations, Liberty Tree Radio on YouTube, and we are on UltraNet, Hallmark, and Golden Spike Technologies, east and west of the Mississippi, along with Alaska, and CB base stations. Good afternoon and evening to our friends out there, no matter where you are, around the clock. It is 6:14 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Today's date, well, it is Communications Tuesday. We've been talking about CB radios. Got my curiosity up. I just went over to eBay real quick to see what we had that was relatively local here. And, well, for Tuesday, it is the 4th of August. It is the... Boy, I hope I didn't say July last hour, did I? No, I don't think I did. But if I did, slap me in the microphone. It is the 4th of August. It is the 12th year of open Fabian Socialist and Soviet Socialist occupation of America with a K, 2020. Old Earth calendar, 2020, year of conflict and the dance of swords. The battle begins, and in fact, communications For all of you out there, organize, arm, equip, and train as militia. Establish a 510 program in your area of operation. Make sure that you, again, are setting up and establishing in advance communications, transportation, and medical support units. Those three are actually integrated and interlocked arms that are as critical as the combat arms. In fact, in many cases, more so, because infrastructure very, very quickly is going to be damaged by incompetence, and it's bred. Incompetence is bred, and malfeasance is bred into all of the commercial medical support systems, etc. I don't care what it is, and communications won't be in any better shape unless we are ready and we promote it so that others are ready, okay? Let me give you a little example. I actually have one of these, but this popped up right away in the eBay search. However, it's Howell. Oh, whoa, it's just north of me. Oh, really? Well, I didn't even look at the location. Ah, wow, I don't have to have that delivered. Tornado, Palomar, AM, SSB, bilinear amplifier, CB, CW with preamp, used, works nice, looks tired. Beat up, kicked in, right? But Star Wars lived in, looks fine by me. Anyway, let's see, what was he asking here? Price-wise, well, current bid is $100, okay? Now, this particular unit is 100-watt linear, which is more than most of you need. However, I would point out that with for instance, a green machine, one of the older CB base stations, the 23 channel, 2 or 3 watt, 4 watt would push this, easily enough. And in fact, it says here, hold on, it says the guy was using a 2 watt transceiver to push this unit before. That's what it was hooked up to. However, it'd be nice to have a little more going out the back end of the regular unit, so an upgraded radio or base would be kind of nice. In this case, this 100-watter would be really great for using with basically what is a Yagi antenna for CB radios. Everybody calls them beams, okay? Yagi radios, when you're using DHF and UHF, are a very different bird, but when you're talking a really long wave and it's AM, guess what? Then the array, the antenna array, looks pretty, let's just say, big. And that we call them, they're called a set of beams, of course, constructed. Typically, they were home built. There are a few people that did manufacture them, but they're still home built. I mean, I don't know that anybody in any particular vast factory cranked out thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of CB beam antennas. It just didn't happen. So usually what happened with CB, with a set of beams / a linear unit like that, is a guy was really good with something that he came up with design-wise. He usually was in some other area, not just radio. So he came up with a mechanical solution, and because of that, wasn't that hard. I mean, radio antennas are not that complicated, to be quite honest. We've mentioned that many times. Don't worry, you could build one too at home. But to come up with a different idea based on usually what part of the automotive industry, for instance, that a lot of people were in, they would see a connector, a fastener, a different system that was out there, and they would adapt it and bring it over into the radio sphere. So different types of even automated and electric adjustable beams that would even retract and expand. I mean, that was kind of neat because you could actually hide them away, or you could take it offline and to a degree harden it from weather, especially since Michigan, where we are here, we are on a peninsula where we go from, highs to lows and winds to no's. And because of that, the ideas that some of these people came up with, in the short term they were great, but in the long term, remember, motors die out, technology changes, interests change. So the people that came up with these ideas, and many have produced several hundred, may have produced only dozens or hundreds or under 100 of something, and you may still run into it out there circulating. The same is true with linear amplifiers. One of the guys we used to have here in the area built up to 1,000-watt linear amplifiers. What would he use? He used to use the old latch-type refrigerators as the casing for the amplifiers. Usually, of course, by the time he's done, he'd have 7 or 10 kicker fans in the back to cool the thing down. You'd have massive insulators and massive arrays, fin arrays, to try and cool the system down because of the amount of heat built up. Some of these guys look pretty gruesome or grim because it was kind of their addiction to build the technology, and you can have boo-boos and accidents. So it's kind of like going to an old bomb expert. You got some fingers missing. Yeah, just because I know how to do it doesn't mean that something can't be done wrong. Oops, somebody was helping me, and they did it not quite the way they should have. Kaboom! Well, the same is true with electronics, guys. And again, when you just kind of like you want to go faster. Guys on motorcycles back in the day, they wanted to go faster. They kept going bigger. Every once in a while, you have a boo-boo. If you're lucky, you don't become road pizza. Same is true with regard to building electronics. So, I mean, just don't touch that wall. And Bob wasn't with us anymore. No, boom, or the bomb. The bomb maker wasn't with us anymore. But in this case, linear amplifiers is kind of cool. I just popped into this one for any of our guys listening in Michigan, whoever gets there first. Of course, now it's still under bids. Got 5 days to go, and as was pointed out, the real bidding war will start towards the end of that, as long as the guy sticks to the cycle. But it's a Tornado Palomar AM / single sideband bilinear amplifier CB/CW with preamp used. Works nice. Just because it doesn't look pretty on the outside doesn't mean it doesn't work well on the inside. Just something to think about there. So again, check it out. That's over at eBay, and it's the location is in Howell, Michigan. Like I said, that's due north of us, next county up, which is kind of cool. So I'm going to have to actually see if I can get hold of this guy. Another thing, there are commercial linears available. In fact, right there when you go to eBay, let's see, Midland HF757 CB linear amplifier, 27 megahertz, 2 meter, 200 watt. Fry your ass off. It's a lightsaber. It sounds like a lightsaber, and it's just sitting there. Okay. Anyway, there's a number of options, brand new out of the box, and older stuff laying around, and a lot of stuff that is home construct or, again, component construct / home built, but by people who know what they're doing, that this is what they like to do. You never know what you're going to run into, but, again, do shop around and do a survey of your area of operation. You never know what you're going to actually run into that might be over at Facebook Marketplace. That's another spot to look. And don't forget Craigslist. But, again, it's a roller coaster. No matter where you go, you never know what you're going to run into. So there could be anything out there, and there typically is. People get old. Got to remind you, watch these estate sales. I got a barrel of antennas, a cardboard barrel, 40-gallon barrel, full of antennas from an estate sale here a couple years back. And in fact, I just handled about 2 or 3 of them I've got as reserve antennas here. They're just sitting here stacked up, over in the corner with some of the other technology. And again, it's free or almost free. You get to the end of a sale like that, people don't know what they're looking at. Are those fishing poles? Are those, well, no, those are antennas. Well, nobody wants them. You want to take them? Well, sure, but you sure don't want something for, no, I'm going to have to throw this stuff away. I don't know what to do, or I can't move it. Seriously, guys, go to the end of these estate sales. You will be loaded down with equipment. I got gun holsters, radios, gun cases, toolboxes, anything you can imagine, everything and anything you can imagine, roasters, toasters, coax, got miles of coax. I got a roll of coax with one of the estate sales. We picked all the machining equipment on. It's probably about 150 foot of brand new coax. That can be sitting off to the side. And actually, it's exterior grade and double shielded. So the guy was a ham operator, but I don't know where his radio equipment went. I don't know if somebody else or maybe the family already got hold of somebody, or they had someone that was a friendly who was working the working equipment, and maybe they came in and already had a deal. I don't know, because the gentleman did pass away kind of abruptly. But there was a monster mast there. There was a whole bunch of antennas, including a couple of electronic arrays. Not like a linear beam, or forgive me, not like a expandable beam set that's electronic. I've seen only a few of those that have survived over the decades. But some really nice equipment, but nothing attached to it. Okay, so you're looking at a significant antenna array, and there's nothing laying around that matches the equipment that it should hook up to. So what's really fascinating is somebody got some goodies, and you never know. You might be the one to get in there and get the goodies, which is why you need to pay attention, especially right now. We're counting down the clock. The bad guys, obviously, we're going to hit the shipwreck in November one way or another. It doesn't make any difference. And if they, no matter what, we can't live with the situation we're in, so we're going to end up going to war. I mean, it is not. It's not a light idea, but it's the idea, get over it and get on with being prepared, because we got to hit the switch. We've got to deal with this. The ring knockers and the spit swappers plan on screwing us one way or another. We need to have all of these alternate solutions in place and dispersed appropriately so that we are able to preserve the technology. In other words, we outnumber our enemy to begin with. So imagine 1 million, 10 million, 20 million, 100 million pieces of technology out there in every category. It's impossible to destroy them. I'll say, well, it's not impossible. Yeah, pretty much it is. Okay, the survivability rating, in fact, the advantage of the preponderance of technology we have in all these different categories dictates that we would have sufficient throw weight in every category to continue to function effectively. That's the idea behind mass saturation, people. Okay, if you don't have deep bunkers underground or whatever, you have to have redundancy. Well, in peacetime, if you build that redundancy up, it makes all the difference in the world when somebody starts throwing bullets or mushrooms and marsh gas. Okay, nuclear devices and biological and chemical weapons, which is what we need to be ready for. And by the way, thank you to Alex. I saw that Texas Star DX350 linear amplifier. Not as beat, and in fact, that looks like it might be a newer model. It's already got a bid of $281 on it, and that's located down in Manchester, Kentucky. So but again, looking at it, I mean, the thing is immaculate. There's a lot of old equipment, or I would say mid-age equipment, that is still out there brand new in the box, because a lot of people did like we've done, where you buy 3 or 2 because you like it and you're planning on using it. But they only use so much of it. Another example of something I really like to run into is Heathkit technology. I can't emphasize enough. In fact, looks like I'm slavering over something I've just found here. Yeah, it looks like a complete Heathkit package located in the northern end of Ohio, which is where I got my other Heathkits at my Mohawk that I have right now. And $149. I'm not going to say any more, because if I bid on that, I want that. That's another complete Heathkit system on standby, ready to roll. All 4 boxes, all the add-ons. So I'm not going to say any more. I learned, if we talk about it on the air, some of the stuff just vaporizes before I can get there. We already had that happen with those hamburger patties the other day. First it was only 4, then it was none, and as our caller pointed out, they're sold out. So anyway, go to eBay, Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, and watch for local estate sales. I just missed, in fact, it's one of those things where I looked at it and we had to wait, would hesitate a little bit. From one of the estate sales, somebody put a whole pile of rack-mounted electronics, everything to put basically in talking to the person, because she said, my dad passed away. Rack-mounted VHF, UHF, and FM transceiver technology, and somebody looked at that, saw the picture, and ran faster than I did. So if you see it, you want to get it. I still got a bunch of the other little stuff, but I didn't get the big pieces of equipment that were large ticket items. It was a rack-mounted FM transmitter, probably worth, I looked at it on the books, about between $2,400 and $5,000. Somebody walked in there and swooped that up quick. It's very similar to the model that Ramsey used to offer for about $3,800. So just to give you an idea, in fact, looking at it, I couldn't be sure because Ramsey's basic box is an industry standard, and it could have even been a Ramsey. I just couldn't be sure with the image that I had there, but I knew exactly what it was that we were looking at, which is okay. Uh-oh, I have a black four-pawed keyboard operator trying to help me here. Again, solutions. Oh, by the way, somebody else asking about mics. Guys, there's all kinds of power mics out there. You don't now. There's the challenge. I haven't even talked much about that, but let's bring this up. I've always pointed out that the more stuff you put batteries in, the more stuff you need piles of batteries for. Okay. So the advantage of the power mics, a lot of them, is that you do boom when you get out there, but let's remind everybody that if you have something with batteries, you better not have the batteries somewhere else. We have via FRS radios, a number of handheld radios, and I keep a certain number on each one of the vehicles. But I also go to Dollar Tree, for instance, even though they're rechargeables, they're AA or AAA. Most of them are AAA right now, I've noticed. I go to a Dollar Tree and I buy a couple dollars worth of their 6 or 8 battery packs of AAAs and put them in the vehicle automatically. Every once in a while, we pull those out, use them for some other electronic junk that eats batteries, and I put another batch in the vehicle to replace it. Now, typically they don't go down that fast. And one nice thing about FRS radios, for instance, they're energy sippers. However, I will point out those handheld powered mics that require batteries, they are not power sippers. They are power eaters. Okay, they're because by the nature of what they're doing. So when you are going to buy something like that, buy a better battery. Rule number one, if you're going to use it a lot, buy a more expensive battery than the Dollar Tree batteries, first of all. But and if you want to, go to rechargeables and have a recharger right there. If you're going to use especially a power mic that is going to be, at a desk. As far as lollipops and hog horns and all the other types of post-mounted microphones, there's a lot of cool stuff out there. I'm looking at a unit, but again, yes, somebody goes, my God, look at the price. Yeah, I know. A lot of these things have always been expensive, but they become expensive again because China sport has taken over, and the American stuff that is now sticking around is still out there. Some of it you can't get anymore is now in big demand because the China sport junk looks like it's metal and it's plastic. It doesn't hold up. Whereas the American equipment 40, 50 years later, this is the year 2020, radio equipment from 1970 and 1980 and, whatever is still hanging in there and working flawlessly, and it can be rebuilt, which is why a lot of the stuff, that's why you're seeing it. The guy, there's usually some aficionado, a radio geek, he'll pull the equipment, look at it, tear it down, find what it is that needs to be replaced. Not a big deal. It's not that complicated. And refurbish the thing, and now it's good for another 20, 30 years. So guess what? You're paying more for that, but you're getting a better product, and it's an American-made product. I don't know if those spare parts that were put back in are American-made, but usually the guy that's fixing it, he almost always has tracked down a parts inventory of original equipment. I know guys, remember, that do Kenwoods. We've talked about this on the air over the last several years. That rebuild Kenwoods. They've been scavenging Kenwood parts for decades. That's what they do. Everybody has their niche, okay? So just a reminder there also. As far as base station radios go, we brought up a couple of different brands here. There's a lot of President radios hanging around out there. And again, even if they're not brand new and if they have been refurbished, usually whoever's messing with them likes messing with them and also would like to sell you more equipment. They usually aren't going to screw with you that way. If they get in under the hood, they're going to make it work, and they're also going to probably give you a business card because they want to do more business with you. They don't want to do business to you, okay? So you want to find reputable and competent, obviously, just like mechanics or anything else. But, again, it does not have to be brand new out of the box in order for it to be something that would serve you very, very well and probably for the rest of your life. Not that you're just going to live for the next 15 minutes, but it's the idea that if we talk about using these radios the way we would, say, a phone in the long run, which would go back to, old Earth technology here, yeah, these radios would be around for pretty much most of your life. You'd still have to do some follow-up maintenance once in a while. Remember, you got to clean these things. That's where the radio equipment, know how to clean, know what basic PM needs to be done just to keep them dirt and dust free. And there's a lot of things we don't do that we should be doing. You know, girls or guys, if you know how to run a sewing machine, stitch up a dust cover for your equipment, each piece of equipment. If you're going to have it on the rack, that's something I don't see as often, but you know, it does make a big difference. And it's so simple, it's ridiculous, but it's so priceless in terms of, you know, elongating life. It's like in the field, most people don't use an oilcloth anymore, but I've been kind of practicing that with the M1A and with the AK. And again, it's water repellent in the process. Everything rusts. Everything's trying to go back to the soil. Radio equipment, weapon systems, you, okay, all of us. So, again, a reminder, there's little things you can do that, especially if you become anal retentive about them, it's amazing how much more effective and how much more efficient everything is. I opened up a box today. I got to do a whole bunch of maintenance on some tools that I don't use them all the time, and this particular box actually was out of the weather per se, but I've got to go through some steel and clean it all up. I did part of it by using the bits and the tools that need to be cleaned up. The first phase, just wear them up and they unrust. So, you know, they get cleaned up because of the material they're running through. But I'm still going to have to spend about a half an hour doing some oiling and maintenance on those tools because I can't leave. I just learned a lesson. I'm not going to leave them where I did because they were out of the weather, but not enough. So again, proper planning prevents piss poor performance. A little extra effort goes a long way and saves you other time you can't get back. All your materials that you are buying, it's a representation of your time. So do what you can to take care of your technology to the best of your ability. Now, I do volume, so I've got too much stuff to husband, but I'm building armies. You just need to build yourself up first, then build a squad, and then help to build an army. Be squared away, be ready to go. Another thing about communications here is don't think that it wouldn't be fun to play with building up your own phone system. You know, we haven't talked about that in a while. You know, our ground line copper wire phone system would be so easy to put together in a small town, it's ridiculous. Now, for everybody who goes, what? Well, why not? You know what? In most cases, here's something most you don't realize. If you look up, you'll find that if you go to a small town, you have a whole lot of wire and lines. The telephone poles are weathered and tired. Now, some of that is power still above ground. A lot of it is. I mean, obviously, it'll tell you Edison or whatever the name of the company is your power service is. But a lot of the electrical, as far as communications go, has been abandoned in place. It would not be a big deal, and in fact would only take you a matter of weeks at most, days, if you really got your act together, to put together a small phone grid copper wire system. In fact, Petticoat Junction, remember, you know, Kate with the little switchboard? Guys, it's not that difficult to understand or do, and there's another job for somebody. Well, what's your job? Well, I do the switchboard, and Molly does it in the afternoon, and, you know, Fred does it at night, and we rotate. We got some people working on the weekend. Yeah, it's Schmidlab Telephone Company. The convenience of not having to step out your back on your porch and scream and holler, and not everybody's necessarily going to be ready with radio, nor you're going to have enough radios when the time comes. And radios will reach out beyond the perimeter of what is the close proximity of a small dot community. Maybe have 100 people, 200 people in an area, dozens of houses, so many businesses. Well, half the infrastructure is already sitting there, or most of the infrastructure is already sitting there. So one thing to consider is being ready to pick up and run an independent phone service. And then exchanges and such, the way we used to do. Like here in Michigan, we had at one time over 900 phone companies. It dropped to about 600 in my lifetime, and then dropped down below that yet again. And I don't know what the number is now. A lot of consolidations. But every once in a while, when I go through certain areas, I pass the little, dot phone company that only does like one half of a county. I know exactly where they are, and they're still running. And I asked, one of the storekeepers, hey, the phone, you still using the local phone? Well, oh yeah, our billing is right there across the street. and it covers a quarter of the county or whatever. So it's still out there, and it's not completely gone, and in fact, it would be very easy for us to bring that back up online. There is no reason for us to go into the Stone Age because of the intentional malfeasance of the kosher mafia and the ring knockers who are trying to destroy the sovereignty and the freedom of the country. We can deal with this, and we have to have multiple solutions, not just one. So, find something you want to have some fun with. Wouldn't it be kind of fun to see how far? It's like working on vehicles. Some people don't like working on vehicles. Some people mentally and physically just enjoy making something work right. And then making it look pretty in the process, too, and making it run really cool. I mean, that's why we have people that tweak things. And like I said, eventually can get themselves turned into road pizza if you're tweaking that motorcycle enough or whatever. Oh, well, I'll live with that part of the game, because with freedom there comes the risk and responsibility. They're combined. But risk is tied in there, and if you don't have risk, you're not going to advance. You're not going to develop. It's just that simple. And, again, it's part of that freedom thing. You want to take the chance, that's your option. That's what's missing from this country right now. That's where our problem. That's one of our many problems that we're going to have to deal with. And with the panty waste we got coming up right now that are trying to play, police state, commie, we got to get rid of them. They got to get out of here. We cannot do any more of this. We have to fight. So you guys need to be squared away. Somebody's asking me, okay, real quick here, yes. You don't have to have a linear amplifier to get reasonable range with a CB for operations in the county, the township, or even 2 or 3 counties away. There are a variety of radios, as we just mentioned. I'm looking at a Cobra 29XLR that Janet just sent over here. 40-channel CB radio with mic, with antenna. Yeah, that's a good unit. $40 out of the box. Somebody else's box, they already bought it, and they're selling it. Brand new out of the box, duck box, exactly what I just picked up here, a Bearcat, about 4 or 5 of them not too long ago, $47.27. So there's a Cobra 29 XLR, much more radio for less money. Now it's used, but you get a chance, plug it in, test it out before you kick the tires, so to speak. And I will remind everybody again, if you're going to test a radio or if you're going to buy a radio, okay, listen very carefully one more time, but don't worry, I'll repeat it again. Before you power anything up, first of all, pull out the antenna. Hook up the antenna to make sure everything is properly connected. You always assemble the antenna first. Always have the antenna squared away and ready to use first. First. Don't buy a radio, hook up a power supply, and then just plug it in. Okay? You've got to have the antenna, because if you put power on that transceiver, if it just sits there, it really isn't going to do anything. Okay? But the moment you key that mic, and your transmitter side has to work, the power has to go somewhere, or it's going to feed back and build up and cause problems with a very fine piece of equipment you just bought and paid digits for. So here's a little trick. Antenna first. Once you get the antenna assembled, put it where you want it for testing, and then take that coax and follow it to the other end. There's the plug. Now take and go around to the back of that radio before you do anything else, and screw that antenna very carefully. Don't force it. If you're forcing it, something's wrong, okay? You take a look. Very fine micro threads. Well, it's a mixed thread, depending on what you got, how old it is. But, again, simple. You screw it on. You make sure it's plugged in and secure. Don't torque it down. Just do it with thumb tight, okay? There's little serrations on that little wraparound plug barrel for a reason. And so you squeeze it into place. There you go. You're done there. Now you hook up the power. And then when you turn it on, just in case you boo-booed up and you laid the mic on its side, maybe the mic is keyed up, you don't send energy down the line through the circuit, through the system, and with no place to go. You need to make sure that power has somewhere to go. That's the first rule. Assemble the antenna and hook up the antenna first. Everything else follows after that. Hell, don't even hook the mic up until that antenna is hooked up. That way nobody can boo-boo anything. In fact, also read the manual, know where the on and off switch is, and make sure it's in the off-click position first. All these things can be done. Reading the manual is kind of scary, I know it, because you'll actually have a map and know where you're going, and or have it planted between your ears. Another thing real quick is, yes, there are some package deals out there. Guys got actually the same radio. Well, it's a Galaxy, a DX959 with a linear amplifier and a speaker and the antenna, and we're looking at $179. That's the present. Well, hold on. Ooh, that might be the flat price. Let me double check that before we go any farther. That's the price. Buy it now. $179 flat rate. And SR, SWR meter, looks like everything's with it, actually. Nice little package. Again, if you shop around, look around, you can find mics separate, etc. Enough on that. CB radios, pretty self-explanatory. Marine radios are basically the same idea, but marine radios, okay? All the basic rules apply. So simple, it's ridiculous, which is why I recommend getting into marine radio second, because it's plug and play. Why? Well, look at it like the very strong, clean, and powerful version of your CB, but for boats, which are on the water, and in many cases can go out in the middle of BFE, where if you look around, there's no land, and you need to be able to squawk and talk and get the signal to someone. Well, that's where marine radios come in, but marine radios work just as well inland as they do on the water. So that's another area of interest. Again, you guys are going to make some decisions, but go to eBay if you want. Go to Facebook Marketplace. That's another great place to go. You can area search any of these by particular part of the country. And Craigslist, even though not everybody mentions every one of these all the time, I will. Next, real quick, I mentioned batteries. Yes, there are a couple other scientific and surplus electronic companies that have spare batteries, but beware. Now, there's what's called a trade battery. It looks like a AA, looks like a AAA. In fact, they're AA or AAA cells. However, you'll notice that they do not have that teat on the top that you need to make proper fixture connection with the average battery carrier that's out there for, it's either an add-on or it's something that's built into your radio, or a piece of equipment for that matter, night vision, take your pick, whatever it is it takes, AA, AAA, or C's, or even D's. Now, these batteries are designed for solder. You typically have a solder point connection, and are designed for creating battery packs. Typically, most people are perplexed about that are out there for drills, even for radios, or for old cell phones, or for old wireless phones. I've got a lot of those battery packs, and yes, I already know that I know if I take them apart what they're going to look like. However, they are adaptable because they're brand new, unissued, rechargeable AA or AAA batteries. But I still need to solder my own little tit on the top of them, or I can't make proper connection when you want to stack them or connect them or hook them in, depending on how the battery pack is set up. Now, there are still, though, many conventional AA and AAA rechargeables. NiCad, nickel hydride, ion, blah, 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 blah. There's a whole plethora of special tech out there right now. The reason I bring this up is because usually the battery also requires a specific output battery charger that matches the system that you're investing in. However, most recently, there are a series in some of the scientific and some of the industrial surplus groups that are offering, they got 500-600 of this, 300 of that. They'll actually usually give you a count. What are universal chargers that will adapt. In fact, many of them have an onboard memory. Maybe that's why they're actually selling them off to the side now. But because it's another thing that can go wrong. But they are selling what are adaptable frequency and output charging systems so that they can handle whatever the base system is, whatever it is you're using. Now, NiCads are not completely outdated, but NiCads don't have the pulse potential that we see with a lot of the newer batteries, but they were the mainstay for the longest time. I think I have probably 300 or 400, for instance, of the C batteries that are in the nickel, the NiCad, nickel cadmium. They work. They're not outdated. We aren't going to be running as long, but they still will recharge. and I've got the chargers and all the other junk goes in. In fact, I've collected them. Other people throw the chargers out for NiCads a lot of times. Well, if you have a lot of batteries that pop in, maybe the battery doesn't last but for maybe an hour or two, something to take into consideration. It's on the long end of its history. That's 2 hours more than you had before, and if you have a solar power system or you hook up a solar charger to it, what's cool is the power was free, the charger was a throwaway, the batteries came from somebody else who had a pile of them and didn't want them anymore, so it didn't cost you anything, and you got 2 hours worth of charge out of whatever you're running. Who cares? It's free, and free. What do you do with stuff like that? Well, do you have another location where you want to leave stuff, but you can't really guarantee its security? Guess what? That's the kind of equipment you put there. If somebody steals it, which is not likely because they're going to go, that's old garbage. Well, that's cool because it's old garbage. It's really not worth anything right away. Some of it they'll look at if they find it, if you didn't do a good job of maybe putting it out of sight, out of mind in the first place. Or maybe if people just get curiouser and you're not there and they go through that cache that you have, that, you don't make it look too obvious. It's just stuff, things that you piled up that all make sense if you know what you're looking at. But not likely that anybody's going to have a whole lot of interest in because it doesn't quite work that well. It's not the quick plug and play. It's not the latest ear or eye candy or the latest whiz widget of the day. Well, again, take advantage of all the other whiz widgets that are now quote-unquote outdated. It's kind of like I joke about it all the time. Wow, it's an older battery system, but it's brand new in the package. Yeah. Nobody's going to be excited about it. No, but it works. Yeah. Just like it did when it was made. Yep. It's like if you have a Glock Mark 1, if you have a Series 1 Glock, did you guys throw them all away once they came up with the Glock 2s? Were your Glock 1s all of a sudden totally obsolete and dysfunctional and you couldn't trust them because, wait a minute, no, when you bought them, they were the cat's meow. You told me, Mark, you need a Glock because Glocks are wonderful. Yeah, but then they came up with a Mark II Glock. Well, yeah, it's the latest. Was your old Glock obsolete? Well, no. Well, no, but you did. But I did buy a Mark II. Oh, that's wonderful. But did you throw away your Mark 1s? Well, no.
Well, absolutely. It was stale.
And now we have Glock 4s, okay? So did you get rid of all your Glock 2s? You see how goofy that is when people talk about certain things, they convince people. Whereas, well, if it's bought and paid for, and your biggest limitation we hear all the time is, well, I don't have anything to put in my retreat, or I don't have anything to put in this, or I don't have, okay, what about all that other stuff? Your front line that you absolutely going to use right now, in other words, this is where I say about getting on the table, getting into the game, as they say. If you want to sit down and play cards, you got to have some chips. Well, I don't have many chips, but I got enough to get down and sit down to the table, and I'm on the board. I'm in the game, okay? So think about this with all of the other tech we're looking at. It may be older, but it's built like a brick doghouse. The old saying is built like a big brick outhouse, and it'll just keep right on running. That works just fine. Another thing, a little trick. Last life with batteries. I want you to think about this. Watch for people getting rid of replaceable battery solar lights for the yard. I've got one that's, I think I've had it now for, 5 years? The battery's down on it right now. And how do I know that? Well, because what it is, I haven't been putting rechargeables in there. I've been putting last life AA batteries that came out of other, like flashlights and stuff. The LED lights are power sippers, okay? And if I take what is a last life battery that doesn't work in one of my little cheapy Dollar Tree flashlights, it's amazing there's still just enough power in there that I can put it in that little tiny solar panel battery, battery station, and it has a 3-color light that goes from green to blue to red or whatever. So it's also pulsing and eating power that way. Every time it changes color, that's another power pulse that's eating more energy. You do understand that, right? If you leave just an LED light on in one color, then it has that initial power spike like any electronic item does, and then it flatlines and only consumes so much power from that point forward. So this thing is actually doing more than we really need to. I could switch it over to white, but I like it in color. Now here's what's fascinating. It just keeps it right on running. And a battery that's already dead in one of these little Dollar Tree flashlights will run for about 5 to 7 days in that LED light. Well, I already paid for it, and I already paid. So all I have to do is take a second to undo the bonnet, open up the little battery carrier, take out the last little Sylvania red and white battery that's already was tired. And by the way, it does take a charge. Everybody goes, well, how can it last for 5 or 7 days? Your regular batteries, any of your conventional iron batteries, are rechargeable to a degree because, remember, this is a slow trickle charge, system that's, and small. It's not going to fry the battery that's recharging the rechargeable that's normally on board. So, the reason that they last longer is that little battery during the day recharges to a degree. It does not go up to its original capacity. It's usually about half. But amazingly enough, that's enough power to run that light for all of the night, for 1 day, and then another day, then a third day, then a fourth day, then a fifth day. So that's getting the last pennies out of what is already a penny investment that you have. The light's doing all the work. It's doing all the charging. It does all the running on its own. All I have to do is take a second, change it out, and I've got more money out of that battery. All of your technology can be run like this. In fact, you can come up with a system. You take a little, mark them with a Sharpie, like I've got in my hand right here. Mark them with a Sharpie. Put a black line on it. That tells you it's already been eaten up by the regular FRS radio or by whatever. Put that over into a little tray. Pull one out once in a while. The other one, they finally dies and it just won't take any more charge. Then pull it out, put it in one of those replaceable light fixtures, and let it run however long it does. You can even come up with a system where you replace all of them, even if you may not be completely run out, like, say, every 7 days. Well, that's that much more where you've got something doing something for you. Didn't really cost anything, a few moments worth of time to change out the battery. And husbanding them, you're going to change the batteries out when you do the other equipment, like those power mics I was just talking about. And they're going to eat batteries, they typically do. Not all of them, but most of them do. So, again, it's one of those considerations where how can we, rather than drop into the Stone Age, take all this stuff and use it to the greatest extent so that we stretch out the in-between time before we get the new technology that we're building online to replace the transition technology that we have resurrected from the grave. See how that works? So anyway, lots of solutions. There's all kinds of ideas. You probably have got some ideas, hopefully, with me just talking about this. Well, I could do that. Do it. Experiment. Test. You might figure out or come up with something even better than anybody else has thought of, and you can share it with everybody else, and we will use it. Okay? Most important. Yeah, by the way, that $179 Galaxy, it's a $19 shipping fee, but that's in Logan, Ohio. That's actually pretty close to us. That'd be worth going down to pick up. But for anybody else, for instance, who else was looking at that? Sally. Okay, Sally in Ohio. Yeah, that's close to you. I recommend it. I really do. You're going to have to check it out, get to the other end. But the nice thing about digital imagery, you get a really clear picture, and the guy did a really good photo essay of the rig. So
hey,
if
Dad,
you're interested in it, check it out.
I hate
anyway,
to interrupt because I thought everybody heard about this, but I'm talking to a couple of people in the Yahoo chat YouTube chat where we're streaming. Mando, I'll post it over in the Discord too. I got to pull up the story again. I don't know, maybe you didn't hear it either. Shelley told me about it, and we watched the video of what happened over in Beirut today. You hear about that?
No, go ahead.
Looks like half the city was destroyed in an explosion. They're saying it was a chemical weapons facility that was underneath. Down here where I am, they're saying it was a chemical weapons facility that was stored underneath the city. You watch the video, it looks like it was a nuclear blast. They're claiming 78 people were killed in that. I'm willing to bet it was a whole lot more than that unless the city was dead.
Well, if 78 people, okay, on the one hand, it's supposed to have destroyed. Was it half of Beirut, or did it damage half of a suburb or an area? Because if you only had 78 people
where the skyscrapers are, Dad, right downtown where the skyscrapers are. You watch the video. It looks like a naval explosion off the coast, or like the old nuclear test explosions that were done in the Manhattan Project and whatnot. It looks nuclear, really does. The way it even has the telltale little mushroom cloud, but they're saying it was small, but it literally flattened part of the city. Somebody
okay,
just
well,
posted
we're
the video
almost to the
in
top, so I'll
Discord.
have time to do it during the break. Let's not forget the Israelis are into a bunch of scurrilous crap right now, and like I said, we can expect the Israelis to set off a nuke in the United States, and they'll try to blame somebody else for it, or they'll flat out lie about it. I mean, about what it is or what when it happens. So pay attention because, like I said, right now the Mossad and the U.S. government are planning on a little bomb spree here. It's in line with the timeline of everything else we've seen. So expect and anticipate in advance. That way you can point out to people, oh yeah, we've been watching for this when it hits. Anyway, again, we are at the top, so I'm going to do that. I'll have time to actually break off, I'll leave the airwaves, and then go peruse the video feed out there. Uh-oh, and more of my four-pod keyboard operators are helping me. God bless our republic. Death of the New World Order. We shall prevail, ladies and gentlemen. The Empire's on the run. We're in the march. We'll be back at 8 o'clock. Meanwhile, Ed taking over. More live LTR here. It's Tuesday. And beautiful weather. Bottom of the state, by the way, too. And the blackberries are thick as blackberries. God bless, and we'll be back 1 hour from now. Bye-bye.
The seed in our homeland, boys, let it grow where all can see. Feed it with our devotion, boys, call it the Liberty Tree. It's a tall old tree and a strong old tree. And we are the sons, yes, we are the sons of liberty. Save it from the storm, boys, water down its roots with tea. And the sun will always shine on the old Liberty Tree. It's a tall old tree and a strong old tree. And we are the sons, yes, we are the sons of liberty. March along with the piper, boys, we were born forever free. Let's go pay the piper, boys, beneath the Liberty Tree. It's a tall old tree and a strong old tree. And we are the sons, yes, we are the sons of liberty.